Nobody has more respect for women than I do. Nobody.
Hillary Clinton wants to abolish it, believe me. She wants to abolish our Second Amendment.
I think they didn't deny it. I don't think anybody denied it.
Other presidents did not call. They'd write letters, and some presidents didn't do anything.
Many people have come out and said I'm right.
You really do have to ask yourself, where does it stop?
Hello and welcome to Fallacious Trump, the podcast where we use the insane ramblings of a certifiable kumquat to explain logical fallacies. I'm your host, Jim.
And I'm your other host, Mark. A logical fallacy is an error in reasoning that results in bad or invalid arguments. And the logical fallacy we're looking at this week is the fallacy of equivocation, also known as doublespeak.
So equivocation is where people use a word or a phrase to mean two different things within the same argument. And by doing so, they kind of derail or take the argument on in a slightly different direction than it seemed like it was going sometimes.
Yeah. Equivocation,
as a word generally in the English language, is usually used to mean not necessarily being very clear on what your argument is, or just not having a lot of clarity, really. If you equivocate, you can go both ways. You can say that either one is right. And when you're doing it as a logical fallacy, that can kind of be a feature of it, because you're using that single word or phrase to mean more than one thing.
Yeah, there's been lots of that bandied around during the recent spate of politicking in the UK, with Johnson and the leader of the Liberal Democrats accusing Corbyn of equivocating over his stance on the referendum, which he kind of hasn't. He's just been a bit unclear insofar as he hasn't been as clear as the Liberal Democrats, who are just saying bollocks to Brexit, and he's not, but he hasn't been equivocating. So it's that kind of, it comes in the set of things which are like dithering, delay, and equivocating. Yeah, in that
it's a fallacy of ambiguity. So our first example actually doesn't come from Trump, although it is Trump adjacent. Okay. In that it is from Mick Mulvaney's kind of crazy press conference where he admitted all of the things that they'd been saying weren't happening. Right. And this particular part is in response to some testimony that was given the previous day, I think, from Michael McKinley, who, when he testified, he gave his opening statement and said, "The timing of my resignation was the result of two overriding concerns. The failure, in my view, of the State Department to offer support to Foreign Service employees caught up in the impeachment inquiry on Ukraine, and second, by what appears to be the utilisation of our ambassadors overseas to advance domestic political objectives." And then he clarified that last part by saying, "I was disturbed by the implication that foreign governments were being approached to procure negative information on political opponents." So he's saying part of the reason he resigned was that our government was trying to get foreign governments to give us negative information on political opponents, specifically to Trump. Yeah. Now, Mulvaney characterises this as just politics, and here's what he said.
Well, McKinney said yesterday that he was really upset with the political influence in foreign policy. That was one of the reasons he was so upset about this. And I have news for everybody. Get over it. There's going to be political influence in foreign policy. I'm talking to Mr. Carl. That is going to happen. Elections have consequences, and foreign policy is going to change from the Obama administration to the Trump administration. And what you're seeing now, I believe, is a group of mostly career bureaucrats who are saying, you know what, I don't like President Trump's politics, so I'm going to participate in this witch hunt that they're undertaking on the Hill.
So Mulvaney is using, at the beginning of that, he's using politics in the way that McKinley was using it, to say that what Trump is doing is benefiting personally through his political ambition, essentially, of attacking his political rival, Joe Biden. And then later on in the same thing, he's saying politics is going to have an impact on foreign policy, and Trump's politics and policies are different from Obama's. But that's not the same thing at all. We're not talking about the politics of the US and getting and using influence over foreign powers to get some political benefit for America. Yeah. So by using politics in both parts of the argument, Mulvaney's being quite disingenuous and just saying, yeah, well, this is something he was upset about. That's something we do all the time. It's just part of, having some domestic policy objectives that the foreign policy is getting used to achieve those objectives. Yeah. And he also does the equivocation of Trump's politics with Obama's politics, because it's difficult to ascertain what Trump's politics are, and other than that they're different from Obama's politics. So he's kind of using that. He's bouncing it off the what we associate with Obama's politics in order to say, it's just going to be different from what you're used to. Yeah, which is a different argument than saying, we're not using it to our own political ends to advance domestic political objectives. It's about, he's saying, well, yeah, sure, politics will be in foreign policy is affected by politics. And you go, well, yeah, of course, but that's not what he said. You've just taken one word and you've slightly skewed it. Yeah. And in fact, slightly earlier on in the press conference, when he was specifically, it was pointed out to him that what he was saying was happening was a quid pro quo. Mm. That's when he said, well, we do that all the time. And what he was saying immediately after that was, at the same time as we were withholding aid from Ukraine in return for them investigating the DNC server, conspiracy theory, we were also withholding aid from the Northern Triangle countries, which is the Central American countries. And in that case, that was to get them to basically do more to reduce illegal immigration into the US. Mm-hmm. So he was directly comparing those two things, and saying that these are just two things that we've withheld aid for. One of them is directly to benefit Trump, and the other is to achieve an objective which is one of Trump's, but is theoretically at least for the good of the country. So it's completely different. It doesn't let you escape the illegality of withholding aid to pursue your own personal political objectives. That's still illegal, whether you're withholding aid for legal reasons elsewhere or for moral reasons elsewhere. That's just, you can't get away with that. No. Not anymore. No. I've been able to get away with it. Yeah, exactly. Now we're going to do something about it. Quite, yeah. So our second example comes from a tweet that Trump retweeted in 2015, which was a guy from called, or possibly a woman, who knows, called MP Lefty 67, who said, "If Hillary Clinton can't satisfy her husband, what makes her think she can satisfy America?" Nice. That's a great example, isn't it? That's really good. Yeah. And so the word satisfy, they're obviously not being used to mean the same thing. No. And realistically, the point is that even if it was taken as read, if we take it as true that Hillary Clinton was unable to be sexually sufficient for Bill Clinton, that doesn't have any bearing on whether she is able to be a good president for and therefore satisfy America. Yeah. So I guess that's the way you counter this fallacy, isn't it? You put in the actual meaning that you're using, or the same meaning in both places. Yeah, if you put the same meaning in both places, it becomes clear that it just doesn't make any sense at all. Yeah. So if Hillary Clinton can't sexually satisfy her husband, what makes her think she could sexually satisfy America? Probably nothing. Well, yeah, exactly. I don't think anything makes her think that. She's not thinking that at all. So, quite. So that, but it's quite a neat it's a neat trick, isn't it, that you can do it, because you're going along and you sort of chuckle with inner agreement at the can't satisfy a husband. What makes you think it's satisfy? And it has for me echoes of ask not what American can do for you, but what you can do for America. It's that it's an oratory technique in that respect, isn't it? Yeah. And sometimes it can be more subtle than that, because that's quite a blatant one. Yeah. But there's another Trump tweet from 2018 when he said, "Twitter is getting rid of fake accounts at a record pace. Will that include the failing New York Times and propaganda machine for Amazon, the Washington Post, who constantly quote anonymous sources that in my opinion don't exist? They will both be out of business in 7 years. So he only used the word fake once in that tweet, but he's using it in context, basically. He is saying Twitter is getting rid of fake accounts. These two newspapers are fake news. Therefore, will Twitter get rid of them?
Get rid of them, yeah.
Of course, what Twitter was doing in getting rid of fake accounts was getting rid of accounts that were not the people they said they were.
Yeah.
They were people pretending to be other people or pretending to be humans when actually they were bots. The New York Times and Washington Post accounts, no one was claiming that they weren't actually, the newspapers weren't behind those accounts and they were actually fake accounts.
Yeah.
Trump's contention that those papers are fake news is totally separate and a different meaning of the word.
And now is the time, I think, for Mark's British politics corner.
Okay, so I've only got one clip this week. So, and again, it's not Boris, it's Boris adjacent. So this clip is in 3 parts, and I think it's worth kind of going through it. So this is Labour MP Lisa Nandy, who's the Labour MP for, I can't remember where, Wigan. And she is on talk radio with a presenter called Mike Graham, who styles himself the Independent Republic of Mike Graham. Don't know what that means. And basically they're talking about Boris's deal that he brought back from Europe and the fact that Parliament didn't like it. And then at some point later on, they kind of voted it through and they said this has been passed through Parliament. And so they're really, this current Tory Parliament is very, Tory government rather, within the Parliament, is very clever at covering up the use of words by giving them multiple meanings. So there's this notion that Parliament is blocking the deal. He's come back with this deal from Europe and they're blocking the whole deal. And I've transcribed this entire conversation because they kind of talk over each other. So it's good to kind of read through it, and we'll put it up on the show notes. And it's also, I found it difficult to follow because I started shouting at the screen at how appalling this behaviour on the part of the journalist was. So in this first clip, Lisa Nandy explains to Mike, so this must have been going on, and this is the clip that was on the Talk Radio website itself. So I think it's a shorter clip of a longer conversation that's been going on before. And handily, what Lisa does is explain both what the difference between a deal and the withdrawal agreement in UK politics and their relationship with the EU, difference between those two, and the fact that the journalist has been employing rhetorical and fallacious tricks in talking about the two.
You say that Labour MPs are sitting here trying to use misleading language in order to mislead the public. You keep talking about a deal. We haven't negotiated a deal, and this is part of what is obscuring this for the public. You have to be clear about what has happened here.
So you're going to tell me
you're not telling the truth.
Well, you're going to tell me. Well, I am telling the truth because that's what I do. Yeah. What I don't do is obfuscate the truth, which is what
that's
you
what
people
you've just
do.
Done. That's
no,
exactly what you've just done.
So you're telling me that Theresa May did not go to Brussels.
Telling the public we've got a deal. We haven't started negotiating.
You're telling me Theresa May did not go to Brussels, did not negotiate a deal, did not bring it before Parliament, and it was not voted down 3 times.
She negotiated a withdrawal agreement which settled legal and technical questions and allowed the UK then to go and negotiate a deal. Those negotiations haven't yet started. That is one of the reasons the public are so frustrated. It's one of the reasons I'm so frustrated, and it's one of the reasons that we're trying to bring that withdrawal agreement bill before Parliament for the first time to see if we can get a majority for it, and then allow Parliament and the government to have a role and a say in what those.
Why don't you have an election? Then you can be in charge of.
So the bit that he talks over at the end, she's saying, we need to get this withdrawal agreement before Parliament so that Parliament can agree what the ongoing relationship vis-a-vis the negotiations with the EU would be. So there, she quite neatly just says, okay, it wasn't a deal. Then she kind of hoists him by his own petard and says, you need to be telling the truth. Well, I do tell the truth. That's my job. You go, well, no, that's not what you do, because you are literally have been obfuscating, covering up the truth, doing exactly what he's accusing the Labour Party of doing. So he calls him out on it. So basically, he then changes the subject. So this is clip 2, which is the next bit straight on. And this is where the equivocation happens. So listen out for the multiple ways that deal gets used.
Why don't you have an election? Then you could be in charge of the government, and then you could do what you wanted.
Because if we have an election right now, we give Boris Johnson the power to set the date. And if he sets the date for after the 31st of October, we leave the EU with no deal and no arrangements at all.
Well, you say we haven't got a deal now.
Well, we've got a deal because
you just told me we didn't have a deal.
We haven't left the EU yet, so we've got a deal in that we're still technically.
You just told me we haven't got a deal.
Of the European
you can't
Union.
even have a deal a minute ago and now not have a deal.
I think you're just trying to. I think you're just trying to be difficult.
I think he is too.
He is, yeah, yeah. And I think also what he's trying to do is be an investigative journalist of some standing. And he's just employing the tricks he's heard John Humphreys do on the BBC Radio 4 Today programme, which are very considered thoughts, but they sound like hectoring interruptions. So he's just gone, oh, well, I do that. I can do hectoring interruptions. So the equivocation goes on where she says, if we have, why don't you have an election now? Because if we have it now, so this is on the September the 4th, and the date for leaving the EU was set for 31st of October, having been moved several times. So the problem is, if there was an election now in September, then that would still give Boris the power to set the date, and he would set it after the deadline. Therefore, we would leave the EU, and he would be able to say, I've got us out of the EU. I don't have to die in a ditch like I said I would. I can deliver on my promise, all that kind of stuff. So she's saying, if we do that, we will leave the EU with no deal. And he says, well, you say we haven't got a deal now. I said, well, we have got a deal.
That's not a good thing. If she's saying what we don't want is to leave the EU without a deal.
Yeah.
And when he says, well, we haven't got a deal now. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's why we would end up leaving the EU without a deal.
Yes, because we haven't got one now. The date would come along, and that deal that we don't have now would become the absence of a deal. Yes,
what we
exactly.
Need is a deal.
It's a deal. And he said, well, we have got a deal. And then he said, well, you just told me we didn't have a deal. He said, no. She explained that there was not a deal. You said we had a deal, and she told you that was wrong because you only had a withdrawal agreement. And she then clarifies.
Complicate things.
She does rather.
She tries. I don't think she is equivocating, but she does point out that because we are still in the EU, we currently have a deal in that the deal is the one we've had for years.
Yeah.
We don't have a deal for withdrawing. We have a deal with the EU. So she confuses it. I don't think she's deliberately trying to use a different meaning of it, but she does use a different meaning of it. So I can kind of sympathise slightly with people who say she was equivocating as well, but I don't think she is. I think she's just kind of trying to use his language to say, at the moment, we already are in a position where we have agreements in place because we're part of the EU.
And then he says, you can't have a deal a minute ago and now not have a deal. Actually, yeah. And I think actually what he meant to say was, you can't say we have a deal and not have a deal, rather than the other way round. But he's doing he's trying to get her to admit to the fact that she's used deal in two different ways when she hasn't. She's been very clear to distinguish the definition of deal, notwithstanding throwing in the we're still in the EU one. So yeah, there it is, right there. So let's have a listen to the third clip where he says, I'm not speaking nonsense, I'm not being difficult, just trying to get at the truth.
I'm not. I'm just trying to get at the truth.
Nonsense.
I'm just trying to get at the truth.
We haven't left the EU
Right,
yet.
so do we have a deal?
So we haven't negotiated a deal.
You just said we had a deal.
But we're in the EU at the moment.
Yes.
If we leave on the 31st of October, we aren't. I don't really understand what's so difficult about this for you.
Well, it's not me that's
we're
difficult.
leaving the
I
EU
do
on
my
the
job
31st
every
of
day, right?
October.
You guys haven't done your job for 3 years.
Well, this is just complete nonsense because you're not doing your job now. You're pretending to the public that all we're doing in Parliament is running around
Well, that's what it looks
trying
like.
to stop a
and that's
deal.
what they'd say to me.
We're trying
Because
to agree a
I
deal.
talk to the
That
public
is the
every
purpose.
single day, and that's what they say to me. They're sick to death of politicians arguing over semantics, arguing over little niceties, and making excuses about why we cannot do what they asked you to do, which is to leave the European Union.
There's a nice bit there where he said what they're saying, they're sick to death of politicians arguing over semantics. Well,
that's literally the entire job that they have to do right now.
Yes, quite. And also that's exactly what he's just been doing in this interview in order to try to appear to be a seeker after the truth. There we go. We're going to get sued by the Beatles lawyers once again. There they are with "Don't Let Me Down," because that contains the line, "And from the first time that she really done me, ooh, she done me good," which I think has got it's somewhere between an equivocation and a double entendre.
Yeah. So days are getting longer and longer. Are you planning on releasing an album? For
I am, yeah. I'm going to do a 12-inch mix of those. Yeah. Yeah. That was a rather long one. Sorry about that. Yeah, but it's a slow record. You can't, you can't rush it. Can't rush it.
So in the Fallacy in the Wild, we like to talk about the Fallacy of the Week from a non-political perspective. And this week we have quite a few examples, actually, because our first one is from Alice in Wonderland. And this clip is actually from the 1985 TV movie version. Because although this is in the original book by Lewis Carroll, it doesn't appear in either the Disney version or the Tim Burton version. Mm-hmm. So this is Carol Channing as the White Queen.
The rule is jam tomorrow, jam yesterday, but never jam today.
It must come sometimes to jam today.
No, it can't. It's jam every other day. Today isn't any other day, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So it's jam every other day, and today isn't any other day. So you can't have jam today.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, obviously, Lewis Carroll being humorous here, and the equivocation fallacy is a very big one for comedy. Obviously, when it's a fallacy, it's about people doing it deliberately, using two meanings, and it doesn't have to be the same person using that meaning twice. It can be one person says it, and then the other person responds in a way that means they've completely used a different meaning of that phrase or word. So another example here is from a Monty Python sketch in which an accountant is giving a presentation about his audit.
This firm last year made a complete profit of £1 shilling.
A shilling, Wilkins?
Roughly, yes, sir.
Wilkins, I'm the chairman of a multi-million-pound corporation, and you are a very new chartered accountant. Isn't it possible there may have been some mistake?
Well, that's very kind of you, sir, but I don't think I'm ready to be chairman yet.
That's great, isn't it? Yeah. Well, it's like, yeah, I've got that's the it's like the one in Airplane where he says, I've got a message from the hospital. What's that? It's a large building full of doctors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously the phrase is some kind of mistake. Graham Chapman means it as you've made a mistake with the accounts, and Michael Palin thinks, it's a mistake in who should be chairman of the company.
Exactly. So lovely. So, and as soon as we decided that we were going to do this, the subject for this week's episode, I immediately thought of Abbott and Costello's baseball sketch when, who's on first,
who's on
and what's on second, all that stuff as one. But there's another one which my brother and I used to do. I don't know why we used to watch Abbott and Costello. I think they're great because they're actually awful.
Love them.
They're horrible.
Great.
No, they're not.
I used to love them.
Yeah, well, I did when I was little, and we used to do this sketch a lot. And so this is the one where Lou is trying to, he's being guided in to park a car for a woman that can't park the car. So they go, oh yeah, well we'll do it. So Bud's standing on the sidewalk and guiding him in, and goes like this.
Now wait a minute, take it easy now. Go ahead. Huh? Go ahead and back up. Beg your pardon? Back up. Back up. Go ahead. What do you want me to do? Go ahead and back up. I'll tell you when. You just told me I gotta back up. Well, back up. I'm gonna back up. Go ahead. I can't do the two things at once. I either gotta go ahead or I gotta back up. Now, what do you want me to do? Back up or go ahead? What are you saying? Go ahead. Back up. Please, don't make a production out of this thing. You're only trying to get the car out. You want me to back up? I'll watch for you. You want me to back up? Back up. I'm gonna back up. Go ahead.
With hilarious consequences. Yeah, it's great. So the equivocation is, proceed, and proceed with the backing up, and which direction do you want me to go? So you want me to go ahead or back up? Well, I want you to back up. Yeah, go ahead and back up. And it's just, and it is infuriating, isn't it? even though Lou is at pains to explain, you see, you're telling me to go ahead and back up. What do you want me to do? Do you want me to go ahead and back up? I want you to back up. And he's just like, Bud's going, no, I'm not having any of that. I don't understand what your objection is. Just get the car out, will you? Yeah, you back up, go ahead. And I love it. There was an example that my brother got onto a coach coming back from university, and all the tickets were like pre-sold, and somebody was on the coach sitting in his seat without a ticket, and they just got turned up, and the conductor on the coach said to her, "Come on, get off." But she didn't do a Lou Costello and go, well, which should I do?
Do you want me to do?
Like, yeah, exactly. Yeah, she just got off. He noted it from years of doing that sketch. Yeah.
So we're gonna play fake news, folks. I love the game. It's a great game. I understand the game as well as anybody.
Yes, it's time for Fake News, the game where I read out 3 Trump quotes, 2 of which are real and 1 I made up, and Mark has to figure out which one is fake news.
So, and the thing is, my warning to you is this week that if you stick with this approach in order to try and beat me, I'll have no choice but to use it as a stick to beat you with.
Right.
You see? There you go.
Yeah.
Bit overwrought, okay. But it's an equivocation nonetheless. Yeah. In my defence, I was left unsupervised.
Yeah. Okay. This week, it's not a theme as such, except that all of these come from the same speech that Trump gave to a kind of just Republican convention dinner, and it was kind of batshit. So
there's if in doubt, that we can always rely on it being batshit crazy. Yeah. Okay.
So, statement number 1. We have Secretary Azar, who's doing a great job, really a tremendous job on healthcare. He came to me and he said, "Sir, what people want is transparency." I said, "Explain transparency." And I got it done, and it's going to be put into effect very soon. We signed it a few months ago, and it's going to be in effect. And people can go to the hospital and they can see the prices. They can negotiate. Right now, they don't let you do that, but now you can.
Okay. Explain transparency.
2.
Yeah.
Is
can't see it.
Tell me, Mr. President, tell me, Mr. Prime Minister, tell me, King or Queen, why are we protecting your country and you take advantage really of us on trade? And they go, but nobody's ever asked me that question before. I said, tell me why. They can't think of an answer. The only thing they say all the time, because it's always been that way. I said, well, it's not going to be that way any longer.
There we go with bloody trade is bad yet again. And the fact that there's no answer doesn't make it wrong, man. God's sake. Okay.
And statement number 3.
Yeah.
People said, what's with the light bulb? I said, here's the story. And I looked into it. The bulb that we're being forced to use, number 1, to me, most importantly, the light is no good. I always look orange, and so do you. The light is the worst. But number 2, it's many times more expensive than the old incandescent bulb that worked very well. And very importantly, I don't know if you know this, they have warnings. If it breaks, it's considered a hazardous waste site.
Okay. Okay, I love that. I always look orange. You always look orange. Doesn't matter what light bulb you stand outside, you look orange. Stand by a colour temperature blue filter, you still look orange. What? He's just, let's make America the 50s again, isn't it? What was wrong with the gas light in the corridor? And it's a hazardous waste site. Okay. Quite like that one. I quite like him to say that one. Just have him say, I always look orange. Okay. Tell me, Mr. President, tell me that King of Queen. And that's, you did a great job on healthcare. Okay. That one sounds, okay. I think, trouble is what we know about him and trade and all that kind of, oh God. I think that number 2 is the one you made up.
Okay. Which of the other are you more confident about?
I don't know about confident, but I think the one I really want him to say is I always look orange. Please let him say that.
Okay, so statement.
Yeah, so number 3. Yeah, is real. Yes!
People said, what's with the light bulb? I said, here's the story. And I looked at it. The bulb that we're being forced to use, number 1 to me, most importantly, the light's no good. I always look orange. And so do you. The light is the worst. But number 2, it's many times more expensive than that old incandescent bulb that worked very well. And very importantly, I don't know if you know this, they have warnings. If it breaks, it's considered a hazardous waste site.
And a whole bunch of minions come out of the cleanup crew from
Monsters Inc.
Monsters Inc. all appear and declare it a waste site. It doesn't. They're just no more than
not true
than a halogen strip. That is so good. He does that. Oh God, he's just a second-rate comedian, isn't he? He's like the kind of comedian you go to when you go to holiday camps, and you know they do the same routine, or on a cruise ship they do the same routine over and over again. And he kind of tired. He's going, well, what can I say? I'll just do the self-deprecating thing, Donald. Yeah, I look orange, knowing that it will get a laugh. And it's nothing to do with the bulb. It's to do with your skin dye. That's what it is. Yeah.
So this is where this comes from. Is that in the US, like in the UK, they have the kind of pear-shaped bulbs that you used to get that had a tungsten filament in.
Yeah.
They have stopped using those. They've been outlawed. Just like in the UK, we are using now mostly LED, but some halogen, some different kind of bulbs. And there was a crossover period where the kind of incandescent bulbs were going out, but we hadn't got the good LED stuff yet, and we were using
all the halogens.
fluorescents.
Yes. Yeah.
Which were kind of, they came in a little twisty kind of shape so that you could get enough light out of them. And they were better in terms of energy consumption than the incandescents, but not as good as what we have now. The Obama administration made sure that you aren't allowed to get the incandescent kind of pear-shaped ones anymore, but other ones, other shapes like spotlights and kind of the globe type ones that you have in around dressing mirrors and things like that, you could still use incandescent bulbs for, but they were going to be phased out at the beginning of 2020.
Yeah.
And what Trump has done is said, no, we're keeping them. We're not phasing them out.
Because he doesn't give a shit about
because they don't give a shit about the environment.
Yeah, and actually, it's not really about that. It's about just undoing everything Obama did in order to roll the clock back to 1953. And when incandescent light bulbs were in great use, and they were terrible, and they've been replaced and are much more efficient, last a lot longer.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, is the incandescent ones, they lost such a lot of energy through heat.
Yeah.
Most of the energy that went into making a bulb work was making it hot.
Yeah.
These days, they are 10 times at least more efficient in terms of energy. And the thing is, he says they're more expensive, they're many times more expensive. They are more expensive to buy. They're usually about 3 times as expensive to buy. But they last about 10 times longer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They cost a lot less to run.
Yeah.
So if you've got like 20 bulbs in your house, you're saving a lot of money on your electricity bill.
Yeah.
And you don't have to replace your bulbs as often.
Because actually part
saving
of the
works significantly in your favour.
Part of the function of the incandescent bulb brings about its own destruction, because it causes a spike in the supply, because it actually, it switches it on. And it goes, so there is a surge in the supply just to bring it to life. And because it's going from, it could be in a cold room, it goes to hot, then that surge makes it potentially break. That's why the filaments inside them break a lot, because they get very hot very quickly. And if they've been in a cold room, that just breaks the filament. Whereas an LED... there's no surge involved. It doesn't do that. That's not how they work. Yeah. And they are tremendous. You can have much brighter because they're a lot smaller. So you can have a lot of them in the space of one incandescent bulb, and you can have huge amounts. I mean, the big bulbs that you'd have 200 watt ones for, I don't know, whatever, a flash photography and stuff like that. You can have much more than that in the same space because of LEDs for a lot less energy use. It's just what is it about?
Well, the thing is that apart from the expense, which we've talked about, the two other objections that he has, that the light is no good and that it's a hazardous waste site, are not to do with LEDs. The LED light from LEDs is excellent. It is much more controllable than the light from incandescent, and is much more consistent. And a lot less orange. There isn't any hazard with it breaking. When they stop working, you can just throw them away.
Yeah.
With what he's talking about is compact fluorescents, which they have gases inside. If they break, there was a tiny amount of mercury, and that needs to be cleaned up carefully, but they don't break very often. And the lighting was inconsistent often. I actually had a couple of large compact fluorescent, like a kind of 6-inch long ones that I used to use for video, and they were daylight balanced, very good. Light. Yeah. But and I kept them. I used them for about 7 or 8 years, and they never went or broke. So they were good. But in this kind of standard cheap ones that you get for the house, they didn't always have the best light. But they aren't used anymore.
No,
they're just there's like 2% of the kind of light bulbs that are sold are still fluorescent, compact fluorescents. So.
Well, that's because everything that Trump made his mind up about everything in about 1989.
Yeah,
and he's not changed his mind since, because it worked for him then. Not that actually anything worked, because he went bankrupt several times. But that's it. He's just got stuck with that, and
so so based on that, he's keeping incandescent bulbs for certain shapes. So there you go. Statement number 1 you think is real?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Number 1 is fake news.
Oh, blimey, that's very good then. Not least because the other one is a jumbled mess. That's excellent. That's very good. Nice work. So what is that based on? Any
It's very, some kind
truth?
of snippets of stuff that he's talked about transparency. And it was what he said about transparency was so jumbled that I wasn't quite clear whether it was connected to the ability to negotiate prices and stuff like that. But I don't know. Anyway,
actually, what you should do, I think, once we've run out of either Trump or fallacies, you could just become because then Trump wouldn't be there for you to write the speeches for. No. Oh well, I forget.
Which means that statement number 2, is real.
No.
Tell me, Mr. President. Tell me, Mr. Prime Minister. Tell me, King or Queen. Why are we protecting your country? And you take advantage of us on trade. And they go, but nobody has ever asked me that question before. I said, tell me why. They can't think of an answer. The only thing they say all the time, because it has always been that way. I said, well, it's not going to be that way any longer.
I am absolutely sure he's never had that conversation with any president, prime minister, king or queen.
No, because they're not the people that make the connection between protecting the country. They don't think they are being protected by America, and they don't make the association with trade as a result, because they're more about economic stability and peace and security. And sure, if you want to place your military in our countries so that it gives you a 7-second advantage over North Korea launching missiles further north, then who are we to say? In fact, what we'll do is send you really cheap televisions. So,
this is the trouble, is Trump he doesn't understand allies, or trade,
other people,
or the fact that just because US soldiers are in another country, that doesn't mean you're protecting that other country.
Yeah,
it's sometimes you have foreign bases for your military for
your own advantage,
for deployment and things like that. It's if you have some soldiers on an airbase in Germany, it doesn't mean Germany would have been destroyed if it wasn't for you.
Yeah.
That's not how that works. And therefore you don't have to get the Germans to pay you to keep American soldiers there, because you want American soldiers there.
Yeah.
So that you've got that ability to have people in Europe. And oh Christ, he just doesn't get it at all. There's so much of it that he doesn't get. It's time.
When we had American missiles here in the UK, and there were great demonstrations to not have them here. Mm-hmm. And, with the Americans were complaining that we were demonstrating about it. So, but they're nothing to do with us. It's you just want missiles on this soil because it gets you nearer to whoever your current enemy is. What it does is make us a target. It doesn't protect us at all. It means
it's like
we're
the 50
first
US
line of
nukes
attack.
that are apparently in Turkey. I'm pretty sure that's not to protect the Turkish. There's going to be another reason why the US have kept their nukes there.
Because Russia's not far away. And, exactly. And Iraq, and Iran, and all that is kind of there. Quite. And the Russians are in Syria, which is even nearer. You think, they're not going to put them there to protect. Well, we know that they're not protecting Turkey because they just got out of the way and let them be not very protective of their own people. So, well, actually, ironically, they were protecting the Kurds anyway. Yeah.
So that means, unfortunately, you did.
Oh no!
Right.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. We were playing a game. Yeah.
It's actually scored this thing. So your score is now 14 out of 35, which cancels down to 2/5 or 40%.
Oh, well, which is still sounds, quite substantial.
It's a nice round number.
It's a nice round number.
You've built up enough wins that you'd have to drop quite badly to go below chance again. So
okay.
I think you're doing all right.
There's still a chance that might happen.
Oh, it's likely, I'd say, but still. Yeah, it's the part of the show that this week at least is called Never Trumpers Are Not a Logical Fallacy. Because
I love that invention of Never Trumpers. That is just such a brilliant shorthand, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, Never Trumpers actually does refer to mostly Republicans, but basically people who used to say before Trump that Trump would never be an okay thing to have as a prime minister, as a president, which is fair. Yeah. Because he is.
And it's actually true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Trump has decided that Never Trumper means anyone who doesn't agree with him. As any Republican who doesn't kind of absolutely kiss his arse. And most recently, he's been using it to describe people who are testifying against him in the impeachment inquiry.
Fair enough. Yeah.
But he tweeted on October 23rd, he said, "The Never Trumper Republicans, though on respirators with not many left, are in certain ways worse and more dangerous for our country than the do-nothing Democrats. Watch out for them. They are human scum." So that's
nice.
A president of the United States calling members of his own party human scum.
His own party. Yeah.
That's
people who ostensibly support the cause that he is the leader of. Human scum.
Yeah.
Nice.
He keeps calling the people who are testifying Never Trumpers. He called Bill Taylor, who testified last week, a Never Trumper. And Bill Taylor he's the US ambassador to Ukraine. And he was appointed under Bush. He was a West Point graduate. He was a infantryman in Vietnam. He's a kind of, American war hero who Obama took out of the position of ambassador to Ukraine so that he could put someone who agreed with him on policies in, who resigned under Obama in 2014. When Trump came in, Mike Pompeo convinced Bill Taylor to come back out of retirement to be the US ambassador to Ukraine, and convinced him by telling him that Trump's foreign policy was very much in favor of Ukraine and against Russia, like supporting the Ukraine against Russia.
Right.
So they lied to him, basically, to get him to be the ambassador. So at no point has he been a Democrat or someone who was, he voluntarily came out of retirement to work for Trump, basically.
Not a Never Trumper. He's been a Trumper.
He's been at the very least a Republican.
Yes, possibly against his better judgment, a Trumper. And now he's discovered in his role as ambassador to the Ukraine certain things that have gone on that he doesn't think ought to have gone on, and brought them to the attention of the people who look after that kind of stuff. Consequently, he's now a Never Trumper. I was a Trumper up until this point, and now I'm not. It's a not Trumper. I'm just like disagreeing with you. Yeah. No longer a Trumper, not anymore.
Bill Taylor's testimony was pretty damning because he wasn't on the call to Zelensky, but he normally would have got a transcript of it because he's the ambassador to Ukraine. So that makes sense. If there was a call between the president and the president, then he would be kind of looped in and know what had gone on and what had been talked about so that he could continue to do his job effectively. He didn't get a transcript of this call, but he had heard that it had gone on. He got a kind of cryptic summary of it from Ukraine, and he talked to a few people who had been involved and were on it and found that they had kind of said, the call could have gone better, and he
something to say.
He heard basically that pressure had been put on and Biden had been mentioned, and kind of found these things out, and he's the guy who was having a kind of a text conversation with Gordon Sondland, saying, why are we withholding aid in return for dirt on a political rival, basically. It was kind of upfront about it, and Sondland was going, no, I don't know what you're talking about. This is crazy. No. Shush, don't talk about this on text.
We are not... yes. We have nothing to hide. There's nothing to see here.
Yeah. So, because the investigation is being done, as far as the Republicans are concerned, in secret, in a kind of Stalinist way.
Right.
We don't know what the actual testimony was, but we do have Taylor's prepared remarks that he opened his testimony with. We also have the prepared remarks of most of the other people who have testified, including General Vindman, who testified yesterday as we're recording, who is a military officer who he was born in the Ukraine, and he fled to the US when he was 3 years old with his parents. And he's won a Purple Heart. He has served several ambassadorships, and he's basically been a staunch US person his entire life. He has worked for the US military.
Not much of a Ukrainian.
There is no way that really you can say that he has done anything other than valiantly serve his country. And he was on the call to Zelensky.
Oh, right, yeah.
And apparently his testimony has confirmed not only a lot of what the whistleblower said, he did say that the transcript was reasonable in its kind of clarity of what had actually been said, but missed out several things, including specific mentions of Burisma, the company which Hunter Biden was on the board for, and a couple of other things. So, again, his testimony... quite bad, bad for Trump, that is. And Trump naturally has decided to say that he is a never-Trumper, and several Republicans, not only that, but that he is obviously, clearly a Ukrainian double agent.
And since the age of 3.
Yeah, since he was born in Ukraine, that's obviously, the only thing you can assume is that he's obviously... actually working for Ukraine against the US.
Deep undercover as a sleeper for 40 years. Yeah. And then they've woken him up just on this one phone call and said something a bit like the Ipcress files, that said something in his ear, and now he's coming out with all this tosh in a Ukrainian accent. No, it's just...
And the interesting thing is that this actually seems to have gone a bit far for some Republicans, calling this patriotic war hero a Ukrainian kind of asset. And even Liz Cheney has come out and said it's shameful to question his patriotism and his love of this nation. Which, I mean, when you've got Liz Cheney speaking out against other Republicans, that's pretty amazing.
That's quite serious, isn't it? So getting to the point, if it hasn't got to the point where. Yeah, they're just going with you're even making too much noise you're giving Republicans a bad name. So actually the most of the Republicans, like Liz Cheney, you can wait for the next tweet, she'll become a never Trumper. A heretofore, she's a betrayer she's a Trump traitor. She's, betrayed the purity of the Trump master race and, all the ideals. She's now turned on me in this witch hunt. It's all cascading around me. So it's, good for her for calling it out.
Well, I'm wary about saying good for Liz Cheney for anything. But speaking of people giving Republicans a bad name, Matt Gaetz, congressman and man demanding to see the manager in a forehead shop, is he kind of corralled a group of other idiot Republicans together to storm into one of the confidential hearings last week, which was probably against the law at least, and definitely very bad and also completely unnecessary because these investigations that they are doing, the Republicans are trying to say, because they don't have any kind of actual substance to argue against, they can't say Trump didn't do the things he's already admitted doing, given us the transcript of him doing, and then done again on TV. They have to say, well, this is being done in a very bad way. The way that you are proving that the president has committed lots of crimes is not okay. And so what they're saying,
so it becomes a meta process.
So what they've said is this is all being done in secret, and it's like in Soviet Russia. And the thing is, the Deputy Assistant Defence Secretary Laura Cooper was being deposed by the House Intelligence Committee, and in their desperate attempt to show that this was a Stalinist regime doing something in secret in the basement of Congress, it was happening in a SCIF, in a sensitive information compartmentalised facility, and that is designed to prevent basically people spying on what's going on, because some of the stuff that you might hear when you are deposing high up government people are national secrets. So what you don't want is foreign people listening
getting out. So
they have it, they hold them if that might be a possibility in these secure facilities. And Matt Gaetz and his friends stormed in with cell phones and broke all the rules of being in that place, and probably several laws. And they stayed there for 5 hours, ordered pizza, and disrupted the depositions. The thing is, there are, I think, 11 Republicans on the Intelligence Committee. So it wasn't a Democrat kind of run thing that the Republicans didn't have any access to. The Republicans on the committee can just go and tell Trump what's going on if they want. It's not a secret.
Because you would want members of both parties there to make sure that to be the checks and balances in place to make sure that what's going on is acceptable to both parties, that they aren't doing things that they're going to be accused of distorting the law or not recording what's been going on and what's being said properly. So, what better way to do it than to have half Democrats, half Republicans?
But the thing is, and why these are done in secret, is that this at this stage in the impeachment inquiry, what they're doing is gathering evidence. They are not holding hearings for everyone to find out what the evidence is. They're going to do that now. Nancy Pelosi's announced a vote to start the public part of the impeachment inquiry. But what they've been doing, it's like if someone is accused of a crime, the police quietly questioning people who might know something about it, instead of immediately going on TV and saying, right, we have had this accusation that this person has committed this crime, and we will be investigating it, and all of the investigations will put all of everything we hear in the papers. That's not how that works. They wait until they have
because all your likely evidence providers, they're all going to run the ground, aren't they? Yes, And so no trial, nobody's on trial.
Not yet.
They're just gathering all the evidence to see whether a prosecution needs to be brought.
This is the part that informs them for the next part. And when they have the public hearings, all of it will be out in the open. And I'm reasonably sure that actually if the Republicans thought about it, they wouldn't want the stuff that has been talked about so far to all be out in the open. It will come out, the stuff that needs to. But there's going to have been a lot said that possibly they would rather wasn't said in public.
So the optics of storming the hearing was to try and make it into a biased Democrat-led and solely Democrat-organised and held inquiry. So somebody's been put on trial without due diligence and the process of law being applied, but it's completely wrong. What it's made them look like is they're trying to cover up stuff that's being talked about.
In fact, what they've done
for their own ends. It's kind of backfired. There you go. That's exactly it. Yeah. And finally, some things we really don't have time to talk about.
Stop the presses. Trump has done a good thing. Wait a minute, that's going to need an asterisk. Let's just say Trump was president when a good thing happened. US Special Forces carried out a raid which resulted in ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi blowing himself up. Trump announced al-Baghdadi's death in a batshit crazy press conference at the weekend, in which he went into great detail about the terrorist leader's last moments, which he apparently spent in fear, whimpering and crying. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, said he wasn't quite sure where Trump got that information, since reportedly the live surveillance feed that the White House had access to had no audio. It also seems likely that Donald didn't watch it live, as the raid took place at 3:30 p.m. Washington time, at which point Trump was still on the golf course. The official photo the White House released of Trump and the generals apparently watching the raid in the Situation Room was taken over 90 minutes later, and the photographer forgot to tell them that they were supposed to be looking at a screen, not at the camera. We must, of course, remember what Trump tweeted after bin Laden was killed. "Stop congratulating Obama for killing bin Laden. The Navy SEALs killed bin Laden." And I'm sure he'd want to be held to the same standards.
Yes, of course. In that wonderfully witty and well-observed way that only crowds at sporting events can muster, a collective comment was directed at Trump at the Houston Astros and Washington Nationals Baseball World Series game on Sunday. I love the way that they came up with, as one, with superbly apposite humour, the only thing they could to thumb their noses, satirise and belittle Trump in one 3-word phrase when the crowd of thousands spontaneously chanted, "Lock him up." Whilst cameras picked up veterans for impeachment banners behind the catcher, the Morning Joe show said, "We are Americans and we do not do that. We do not want the world hearing us chant, 'Lock him up' to this president or to any president," when clearly thousands did do just that. And of course, as for presidential candidates and wives of former presidents, hell yeah, no problem, chant away at them. Hey, we'll even get the president to join in to show just how American he is.
The video of Trump looking, when Trump appears on the screen, he kind of looks up and he's so happy because this is the same day that he announced that they had killed the ISIS leader, and you can just see him go in a matter of seconds from, "Oh yeah, I'm on the screen, they all love me, they're going to cheer for me, they're booing, oh, now they're chanting." And it's just, it's amazing, the emotional roller coaster that he goes on. It's brilliant. It's brilliant to watch.
It's so good. It's a bit like when Boris was listening into Stormzy at Glastonbury, and one of his songs has got "fuck Boris" in it, and Boris was convinced it was back Boris, so he's dancing away to this playback, and he's just going, "No, fuck Boris."
It's like in The Simpsons when everyone's booing Mr. Burns, and Smithers says, "No, they're saying boo Earns, boo Earns."
Yeah. Oh, that's excellent. Great.
Former White House Chief of Staff John Kelly said at a political summit recently that he cautioned Trump against hiring yes-men, apparently telling him, "Don't hire someone that will just, nod and say, that's a great idea, Mr. President, because you will be impeached." Press Secretary, who's never actually held a press briefing, Stephanie Grisham, decided to challenge this wisdom by taking yes man to its natural totalitarian conclusion right on the eve of Trump's impeachment. In a statement to CNN, Grisham said, "I worked with John Kelly and he was totally unequipped to handle the genius of our great president." Rumour has it that she then unfurled several banners featuring the president's face and started humming the battle hymn of the Republic.
Oh, yeah. In the latest from the No Smoke Without Fire department, the White House is looking to veto the new SHIELD Act passed by the Democrats last Wednesday. SHIELD stands for Stopping Harmful Interference in Elections for a Lasting Democracy, which also won the most unambiguously specifically focused and self-referential acronym award, or MUSFASA, of 2019. Basically, it does what it says on the tin, as we say in the UK, and it also imposes new rules on placing political ads on social media to put them in line with the rules with TV and radio. All good timely stuff, vital to elections, I hear you acknowledge. And you'd be just like the White House, who agreed that transparency and accountability were vital to elections. And yet, weirdly, it also argued that the bill's reporting requirements would overly burden campaigns without securing US elections, calling the act redundant, overly broad, ambiguous, and unenforceable. Well, it's certainly been unenforceable whilst there's no rules in place, and with Mr. Unenforceable in place too. Good to know that Trump is thinking first of others, and the extra burdens it had placed on them rather than himself and his self-centered act of megalomania for once. Cheers, Donny.
One of the funniest reactions in the Ukraine-Biden debacle has been watching Trump's large adult children claim to be outraged that the child of a politician would ever use their father's position for personal gain. The fact that none of them has burst into flames on Fox News is all the proof we need that there's no God. Of course, no Trump would ever gain personal benefit from Donald's presidency, which means it must be a coincidence that the US Marshal Service awarded a $33 million security contract to a firm in which Trump's brother Robert owns a financial stake. Sometimes you wonder what all this corruption is based on, but then you look and it's just corruption all the way down.
Yep. In a way, not inconsistent with the way we all know Trump thinks he's a stand-up comic, and yet he isn't. God damn it, he's worse than Arthur Fleck. Well, it turns out we were so taken in by his infectious humour, the yellow-haired Joker, not the green-haired one, that we'd failed to notice that he was joking all along when he mentioned last week that he's building that wall on the southern border of Colorado. A joke delivered in such a deadpan way it raised the eyebrows of the gathered crowd of Pennsylvanians who began to doubt that they had known since kindergarten, despite being 1,500 miles from Colorado, that Colorado borders New Mexico, not actual Mexico. So, is this a new wall from the Santa of Slats? No, apparently not. He later corrected us in our idiotic misconception by pointing out that when he said Colorado and the wall, he actually said they would be getting the benefit of the wall on the border. What, are we stupid or something? All hail the humble apology, self-effacing, not afraid to backtrack king. Just a thought, can we not persuade Elon Musk to take Trump for free up in SpaceX high enough to see all of the US laid out below, and maybe to step outside for a moment to enjoy the view?
Rudy Giuliani is like a gift that keeps on giving. If the thing you want for Christmas is a terrible lawyer that keeps accidentally admitting to crimes while trying to deny other crimes he also definitely committed. The grown adult who is responsible for keeping the secrets of the leader of the free world has been butt-dialing a reporter at NBC and leaving voicemails in which he badmouths the Bidens and asks businessmen for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay, these ones aren't actually crimes, but give it a week or so.
Won't even take that long. Yeah. Okay, here's another bedtime story from the tales of Brexit. Are you sitting on the edge of your seat? Then I'll begin. So, the big bad boss huffed and he puffed and he brought his deal that isn't a deal to the first house, and blow me down if the house actually let him pass for about 17 minutes, when they then said, we'd rather like longer to look at it, please, and rejected his 3-day timetable. And Bozza couldn't understand why. He'd not read it, so he didn't know how long it was, when in reality it'd take you 3 days just to get all the pages in order. It makes War and Peace look like a 4 a.m. tweet from Angry of Washington. He thus got miffed and huffed and withdrew the whole thing altogether. You see, Mr. Bozza doesn't like scrutiny. He doesn't like revealing that his entire fabric is made of a tissue of lies and bluster, and doesn't like having it held up to the light. He also dodged yet another evidence session from the Commons Liaison Committee on that basis, scribbling a note from his mum saying, sorry, the PM can't come, he's pretending to be invisible. So instead of saying, okay, let's just take our time, he took his ball away and said, right, you have a go at being in charge, see if you like it, and table for another vote on holding an election, his third, I think. No one, of course, was interested. He, like Theresa May before him, offered to fall on his own sword and missed. Even though he said, look, if you vote to dissolve the parliament, I'll give you extra time to scrutinise the deal that isn't a deal, knowing, of course, no one would thus be in parliament to scrutinise it. And no one fell for it, except for one little kid in the yellow-suited opposition party who saw through the boss's new clothes and said, why don't we have a different way of calling an election that doesn't need big numbers, which Bozza called a stunt. And then he did it anyway, and now we're having an election in December when it's dark and cold, and he hopes no one but angry, hot people will vote. And it isn't an election, really, because all it is a way of getting another minority government back in to suffer under the weight of the poison chalice that is Brexit. Sisyphus had it easy. Now, can we please have our sanity back, repair this broken timeline, go back to 2016 and try the other route? You know, the one less travelled that will make all the difference.
So that's all the bad arguments and faulty reasoning we have time for this episode. You can find the show notes at fallaciostrump.com, and if you hear Trump say something stupid and want to ask if it's a fallacy, our contact details are on the contact page.
If you think we've used a fallacy ourselves, let us know. And if you've had a good time, please give us a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can support the show on our Patreon page at patreon.com/ftrump.
You can also connect with us and other listeners in the Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/fallacioustrump.
All music is by The Outbursts and was used with permission. So until next time on Fallacious Trump, we'll leave the last word to the Donald.
That's right. Go home to mommy. Bye. Bye.